A quite famous detail in Star Wars, of all the Jedi in the entire order, Qui-Gon Jinn was the Jedi that Sidious feared the absolute most. Greetings, Acolytes, and welcome back to the Archives. Both Sidious and Plagueis spent more time around the Jedi than any other Sith in history. Under their unique disguises as political figureheads, they often had dealings with the Jedi, Palpatine even more so once he took office as Supreme Chancellor. This afforded the Dark Lord with an unprecedented up-close look at all of his rivals. During the time preparing for Revenge of the Sith, Sidious could scope out exactly which Jedi were problematic to the cause, which of them were the most dangerous. Many might assume that the most problematic of them all would be the Grand Master and Yoda. However, in an ironic turn of events, it was the Jedi Rogue that posed the greatest threat to the Sith. Qui-Gon Jinn was the very first person that Sidious knew had to be removed. His master Plagueis would determine that Qui-Gon was the Sith's ruin should he remain alive, and Sidious saw to it that the Elder Jedi was destroyed promptly by Maul, even being satisfied to sacrifice his prized assassin in order to secure this single Jedi kill. Of all of the Jedi in history before Luke Skywalker, even more so, Qui-Gon Jinn was feared by Sidious. But what is the in-depth look at this? Why did the Sith fear Qui-Gon more than anyone else? He was not the most powerful, the most skilled. He would be easily killed by Sidious in a duel, and yet, he was the most dangerous of them all. Greetings, my friends, and today we'll take an in-depth analysis on Sidious's crippling fear of the Jedi Qui-Gon Jinn. When discussing Qui-Gon, the topic of his rebellious nature and his rogue streak has to be taken into question. Qui-Gon was known for striking off on his own and bending the rules of the Jedi whenever he saw fit. It was actually abnormal if he wasn't actively at odds with the High Council at any given moment, mostly because he took the Jedi Code as more of a suggestion rather than a law to live by. But unlike most Jedi that go rogue, Qui-Gon Jinn was not in the service of his own self-ambition, and was not drawn to the dark side. This in fact made him quite the interesting figure among the Jedi High Council, who never understood Qui-Gon, them failing to see the unique relationship that he had developed with the living Force. Qui-Gon believed that a true Jedi's purpose was listening and obeying to the will of the Force itself. For Qui-Gon, the Force was the ultimate law, not the Jedi, since the Force presided over the entire universe. In Qui-Gon's mind, the laws of mortal society always came second to that of the Force. Qui-Gon believed that the Force dictated existence itself, and that the Jedi were merely servants of it rather than the wider order. And it was for this very reason that Master Qui-Gon Jinn did something that the other Jedi did not. Qui-Gon held great stake in prophecy. Even when the High Council in this era wrote off prophecies entirely, Qui-Gon Jinn would often find himself in situations only because the Force was his ultimate compass, and prophecy was his guide map. As he taught Obi-Wan, the Force always had a purpose for him being somewhere, and he intended to always act upon that purpose. There was a story of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan going to a remote jungle world, where they would stumble across a lair of beasts that were fueled by the dark side. Though it was slumbering in an apparent hibernation, Qui-Gon would proceed to attack the defenseless monster and ultimately kill it, despite the fact that it showed no immediate threat. After this, Obi-Wan was upset and confused as to why they would attack a helpless creature simply slumbering, when the master calmly responded to his student that the Force had dictated that the creature must die. Qui-Gon did not question the will of the Force. He was a servant of the light, and he stated that perhaps the two of them were preventing a terrible disaster, or perhaps they were agents of retribution against the creature. They would never know. They needed only to obey. This moment illustrates that Qui-Gon Jinn was able to do something that the rest of the Jedi could not. Completely surrender his will to the Force. He made difficult choices because he understands that as someone who is able to feel the Force, it is his duty to be the ambassador of its will. In The Phantom Menace, it is the Force that wills Qui-Gon Jinn to seek out and eventually land on the world of Tatooine. For anyone else, this was an unfortunate circumstance resulting from a stray laser, but for Qui-Gon, it was the Force drawing him to the specific world. He would get his answer shortly thereafter when he found the young slave boy Anakin Skywalker. Qui-Gon couldn't yet explain why, but he knew that the boy needed to come with them. It was the will of the Force for him to leave Tatooine. In order to ensure the boy's freedom, Qui-Gon had to gamble with a lowlife and used the Force to rig the dice in his favor. To an outsider, for a Jedi to place a wager and then use the Force to manipulate the outcome would have been unbecoming of them, and at the very worst, an abuse of the Force. But for Qui-Gon, bending the rules was necessary, and because of this, he secured the Chosen One. Qui-Gon's ear was always to the Force, when the rest of the Jedi clearly were not. And my friends, this is the most important aspect of Qui-Gon Jinn's character, and the very same trait that made him extremely dangerous to the Sith. Perhaps the most dangerous a lone Jedi, has ever been to a Sith. Since Qui-Gon was not blinded by arrogance, the veil of the dark side that was cast over the Jedi's vision at the start of the Clone War would not have affected Qui-Gon Jinn. His relationship to the Force was too pure, and make no mistake, my friends, had Qui-Gon been around, he would have uncovered Palpatine. Not only was he the perfect master for Anakin, but he was also the perfect Jedi to defeat Sidious. What made Qui-Gon even more dangerous is the Council considered him to be a rogue, but they still trusted his judgment. They may not agree with his choices, but when he brings up a concern, it is heard by the Council, and they are still very much aware of it because of how powerful and in tune Qui-Gon was, with this being an aspect that also made him very dangerous. In canon, we know that Qui-Gon Jinn was offered a seat on the Council specifically because of his perspectives. This kind of influence that he has with the higher-ups of the Order made Palpatine very uneasy, and if he were to discover the secret of the Sith, he would bring it to the Jedi Council, and Sidious would not have been ready. The Sith relied entirely on misdirection and staying hidden until the very moment where they needed to strike. Palpatine was banking on the Jedi's hubris to blind them, but someone as perceptive and humble as Qui-Gon Jinn would undo everything. And if Qui-Gon had found them, it would not be a matter of hesitation. If the Force willed it, he would strike down the Sith without a moment's notice, without a thought to what the Council would think, without a thought to what the Senate would think, without a thought of what the galaxy might think. If the Force called for Qui-Gon Jinn to strike down Palpatine, he would do it without a thought. Amazingly, Sidious would even say that this was Obi-Wan Kenobi's greatest strength when he ventured to Mustafar, the one thing that he inherited from Qui-Gon Jinn, the thing that allowed Obi-Wan to complete the impossible, defeat the Dark Chosen One. Sidious would say this to Vader: Obi-Wan succeeded because he had one goal in mind, to kill Darth Vader. Had the rest of the Jedi shown such resolve, they would have been much more difficult to topple and destroy. We may have lost. We have talked about this at length before, and the Jedi's resolve that makes them the most powerful. We believe that if the Jedi Order had followed Qui-Gon Jinn, they may have become as powerful as the Jedi of the Old Republic era, the truest warriors of the light. Beyond all of what Qui-Gon Jinn could do for the Jedi though, Sidious feared most what he could do for Anakin. Qui-Gon Jinn was the father that Anakin always desperately needed, the father that Palpatine would eventually masquerade as. Palpatine built his foundation of trust and understanding with the boy who felt completely misunderstood and needed a father, but Qui-Gon Jinn would have understood Anakin completely. Palpatine relied on the Jedi's ignorance and their approach to comfort, so much so that he knew that they would be harsh and that he would have to step in and be the one that Anakin could lean on, his very father. But Palpatine could never fill the space in Anakin's life so long as Qui-Gon was doing it already. What's important to remember about Qui-Gon is that it is Plagueis that mentions to Sidious that he needs fear him, not by anything Plagueis said, but because Plagueis himself feared him. Plagueis had met Qui-Gon, and he knew that he was different. In fact, when it was revealed to Plagueis that it was Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon that were sent to be the ambassadors to the blockade of Naboo, Plagueis was drawn into a panic. He even says, "Worse news yet. I have met Qui-Gon, and he is nothing like the others." When Qui-Gon located the Chosen One, Sidious and Plagueis were filled with a fear that they had never sensed before. They saw everything crumbling down, and even believed for a moment that it was too late. After Anakin and Qui-Gon left the temple for the first time, Plagueis was watching them on a landing pad, and it was then that Plagueis had received a vision of the Clone Wars and Darth Vader. And here, Plagueis knew one thing to be true: if Qui-Gon Jinn were to train the boy, that the Sith would be obliterated, and that Qui-Gon must die. In Plagueis' own words, Qui-Gon Jinn was the key to everything. Qui-Gon Jinn held the ability to train Anakin in a way where the Jedi were truly meant to be trained, to listen to the will of the Force as the son of the Force. Qui-Gon Jinn was without a doubt one of the most powerful, wise, and dangerous Jedi to the Sith in galactic history, only rivaled by the likes of Luke Skywalker in terms of the fear that he commanded. But today, my friends, I hope that we have illustrated exactly what made Qui-Gon Jinn so special. If you enjoyed this video, we would greatly appreciate if you could leave a like and a comment suggesting more lore topics. Thank you so much for your constant support, acolytes, and visiting the channel, and as always, my friends, may the Force be with you, and will it guide you always.